IMF has approved a $509 million credit facility for Kenya in an attempt to help the country boost its international reserves. Joining me now is Ragnar Gudmundsson, the Kenyan representative for the IMF. Thank you so much, Ragnar, for joining us today. Much appreciated. Great news for the Kenyan economy. A $509 million credit facility. It is about boosting its international reserves. And of course, we have been seeing the central bank accumulating reserves because it did want to shore those up. And this is why we saw the shilling perhaps not gain as much ground as one would have hoped, particularly in 2010. Tell us a little bit more about the credit facility.
Well, the main aim of the facility, as you mentioned, is to boost Kenya's international reserves and also to promote a gradual fiscal consolidation over a 3-year horizon. We think that this is a very positive time of Kenya's history following the promulgation of the constitution and its implementation over the next few years. And our goal is to assist the authorities in their economic reforms efforts in this positive environment. The real aim of the program is to assist the authorities in transforming Kenya into a dynamic, high-growth economy while maintaining macroeconomic stability.
Well, let's look at macroeconomic scenarios that are playing out at this point in time. Inflation is sitting at 5.42% in January, and that is up from the December figure as well. We recently saw an interest rate cut in Kenya, and some are worried about the fiscal stance of the government purely because we're starting to see inflation filtering through into many emerging market economies as well. How is this credit facility going to ensure that inflation remains at these levels?
Yes, well, in the context of the program, inflation is set to remain at around 5%. And of course, as you mentioned, for the month of January, we've seen an increase in the inflation. It's above the central bank's target of 5%, so it will need to be monitored closely in the coming months. As you know, if the inflation rate exceeds the central bank's target 5% by 2% over a period of 3 consecutive months, the central bank has to indicate to the Minister of Finance how it plans to address the inflationary pressures. And we will work with the authorities to address these pressures if they do persist. As you know, they're really driven by food and oil prices, so we will need to monitor those closely in the coming months.
Well, how did the IMF... can I interject there? How did the IMF view the cut in the interest rates by 25 basis points? Because it seems that most of the investor community were relatively shocked.
Well, the main aim of the decline in the central bank's policy rate was to promote the continuation of credit to the economy. And so we believe that the inflation environment has been very accommodating and supportive of efforts to reduce lending rates. So the central bank is at the same time trying to promote low inflation and growth in the economy. So this is we understand the bank's growth objective, but of course, as I mentioned, we will be working with the central bank to ensure that this growth-promoting policy does not contradict the central bank's inflationary objectives.
Ragnar, let's touch on tax reform because the IMF also very much involved in this, and the credit facility is also there to ensure that we do see the right reforms to spur economic growth.
Yes, I think there are 2 main areas of reform on the fiscal front. First, tax reform, as you mentioned, and the authorities will be presenting a new VAT law before June 2011, and the main aim of that law, for which we've been providing technical assistance, is to simplify the administration of the VAT, to put it in line with international best practice, and in particular, over time, to eliminate exemptions and reduce the number of zero-rated imports. Some estimates from fund economists show that the cost in terms of foregone revenues from the VAT exemptions and zero-rated imports is close to 45 billion shillings, which represents about 10% of tax revenue. So this is an area where we think Kenya can generate more revenues in the future. We will also be working with the Kenyan authorities on other areas of tax policy and on income tax, for instance. As you know, the authorities plan to establish a tax reform commission, and we will be working with them in the context of the 3-year program to make progress on tax policy. The second important part of fiscal reform is on public expenditure and in particular public financial management. This is a key priority for the authorities, especially in the context of the implementation of the Constitution and in the context of decentralization and devolution of resources to county-level governments. We have been providing assistance to the authorities in the drafting of a new public financial management legal framework that will present an integrated organic budget law, hopefully to adoption by Parliament in 2011. This will ensure that public financial resources are properly accounted for, implemented, monitored, audited, and as you know, this is a key aspect of Kenya's economic policies that donors and investors are paying close attention to.
Ragnar, also let's touch on the growth outlook. I mean, you alluded to many things that is going to boost growth going forward. We're looking at GDP of around 7%, and this is also what the $500 million is set to aim as well, higher growth. Looking at the agricultural sector, and one of the big issues has also been the fact that Kenya has been very much focused on agriculture, and we know the devastating effects of weather patterns and what it could do to the country as well. Looking at issues like that, how do you plan to transcend those?
You're absolutely right. Developments in the agricultural sector are absolutely key for the Kenyan economy. About 60% of the population depends on the agricultural sector for its livelihood. And as you rightly mentioned, there have been concerns recently regarding the possible impact of a drought. The government has indicated so far that it has adequate stocks to meet food security needs in the coming year. Of course, this is something that we also need to follow with the authorities, and one of the aims of the facility that has just been approved is precisely to provide Kenya with a cushion of reserve to protect it against vulnerabilities linked to external shocks such as the drought. So the IMF support should also be seen in that perspective to protect the country against vulnerabilities that could arise from a drought, for instance.